No matter how low your disapproval ratings, what truly matters is that undecided vote and who's persuadable.
You see this thing lining up that looks like a slate of potential, hey, we're the kind of outsiders coming in.
There's still a lot of undecided people, and one of the major factors is money.
And I'm Jim Hummel. Thanks for joining us on This Lively, joined this week by Bill Bartholomew, host of the Bartholomewtown podcast, attorney and former mayor of Cranston, Allan Fung. A new week, a new poll in the Rhode Island governor's race, and you've got to wonder if dismal approval ratings have Governor McKee wondering if he should stay in the race. Allan, let me begin with you. You've run a couple races for governor. You look at the polls. All the politicians say the only poll that matters is on election day. But this is a University of New Hampshire poll that basically has Helena Foulkes, who's announced since our last show, 35%, Governor McKee 19%. He can't get out of the teens, and 40% undecided.
Here's being in those positions in the past, going through two gubernatorial elections against, one time a sitting governor with similar type disapproval ratings. Look, there's still a lot of time. There's still a lot of undecided people. And one of the major factors is money. When you have enough money and outside money on top of your campaign money, you can buy messaging and convince a lot of people your story. And let's face it here, that was just a snapshot in time. No matter how low your disapproval ratings, what truly matters is that undecided vote and who's persuadable. Because once you get into that electoral process, and even with those numbers, I can tell you right now, Dan McKee is not jumping out of that gubernatorial race unless something, dramatic happens between now and that primary. There's always the possibility, especially when you're hearing about even more candidates besides Helena Foulkes jumping into the race.
I agree that the governors will not get out of the race. I don't see any scenario where that happens, barring something totally unforeseen. But
he's not going to pull a Link Chafee back of the DMV and say, I need to concentrate on the job that needs to be done, so I'm not going to run. That's not happening?
Some would make the argument that, you'd be better off doing that. Just focus every day on the bridge and education or whatever it is. But I don't think he gets out. But where he does benefit, of course, as we've seen in some other polling and just common sense, would be more people getting into this race, whether it's Attorney General Nerona, whether it's Speaker Shekarchi, or whether it's somebody totally outside of our current viewpoint on this thing. When the race gets trifurcated or broken down into 4 or 5, that's where McKee has an opportunity to really perform. And those undecided voters, that's what's obviously going to swing this thing, and he's got to win them.
And he's got a base. Why do you think he's sticking with Mr. Alviti? It's that union labor base, that will be a key constituency. Why do you think the governor has shifted his position, on education, where he was a strong advocate, as mayor for those mayoral academies, kind of toned it down a little as governor, so that now, who knows where AFT, NEA are standing. But if you bring a critical core block to that AFL, and have a core constituency in a multi-candidate race, anything can happen, and you're bringing a block of votes. But you mentioned, Bill mentioned a, strong candidate that could jump in, that has a lot of cash, and Speaker Shekarchi. We don't know what Peter Nerona is going to be doing, but that poll showed that he is favorable because of a lot of the anti-Trump messaging, not even just actions that he's taken as Attorney General amongst that Democratic primary base. So anything's a ball game. And when you have the speaker, still sitting speaker right now, being able to control some of the dynamics, at least early on, depending on when he jumps in that race, he could set a different tone with the dollars that he has too in messaging.
But that poll shows what a lot of us know who are follow this stuff for a living, is that virtually nobody knows who the Speaker of the House is beyond the State House and the fundraisers and all of that. So if Joe Shekarchi's going to jump in, he's doing this whole, I don't know, he's hoping Dan McKee might jump out. I don't think that's going to happen. Maybe labor support crumbles at some point, or maybe the fundraising, but the clock is ticking. Here we are in October. We've been talking about this since June, right?
It's kind of now if it's going to happen. And I think it does have a lot to do with, let's see if McKee gets out. And look, the speaker, it seems as though he wants to be a United States senator. Perhaps he's thinking, all right, when Senator Reid retires, or maybe there's an opportunity.
What, in the year 2050?
In the year 2050, exactly. We'll have a brand new Washington Bridge by then, so if nothing else. But, what's interesting about this race right now is the table is set. You see, Helena Foulkes had to do some things very differently than last time. I think the number one thing she had to do was convince people in the grassroots, convince people in nonprofits and those sectors that she cared and that she existed. And now she's out there, oh, I'm on the bus. What do you know? I'm riding RIPTA, and I'm like the RIPTA advocate all of a sudden. Take your sort of microcosm of left issues, and she's found a way to at least get some selfies out on Instagram and position, hey, well, Dan McKee's over here at the State House, not firing Peter Alviti. I'm riding the bus, and we've got to advocate for RIPTA. So there's this dynamic at play. But what I think is really interesting is that national polling right now, including polling in Rhode Island, shows that there's one Democratic issue that is dominant over and over again, and that's tax the rich. Now, you can phrase it different ways, but there's not anybody right now that stepped forth in this state that can be a progressive, not in the sense of super wedge issues, social issues, but a progressive that takes the mindset of wealth redistribution. That's what is a winning message in New York right now in the mayor's race. I don't know that we have that person here, but I think if they get in,
I'm not sure that's
challenge.
the winning message in Rhode Island.
And if it was, I'll bet you any money that one of those candidates would have already picked that lane.
Yeah.
Because
some consultant would have told them,
and the
grab
polling
onto it.
would have shown that, because you're seeing it's all about messaging and who you're trying to turn on a lot of this. Now, in a multi-candidate race, maybe that might pull a certain percentage of undecided individuals. And back to your original point, Jim, I don't see having such a large undecided or lack of name recognition as being a disadvantage, because you can create your own story.
Well, if you got a lot of money,
if you have a lot of
right?
money,
And he's got tons of money.
You got tons of money, and I've seen it. Look, in those past gubernatorial races, between Gina's dollars and the outside money in particular, if they wanted to say Allan Fung's a criminal, you would have had a large percentage of individuals who were getting pounded every single day on digital media, radio, television, believing Allan Fung's a criminal. You can create that perception with dollars.
Yeah, so the other factor that we don't know, Peter Nerona says that he's going to make a decision in October. I think he'd be leaning against it. It's really late to get the money going with him, right? Don't you think? I mean, you have to – Sakarchi's got so much money. Helena Foulkes is ahead of the governor. There's only so many dollars in a Democratic primary.
Well, Peter's still sitting on about $100,000, I think, in his campaign account, but you're absolutely right.
You got to multiply that by 10.
Right. You've got to, because you don't get matching funds until after you win the primary. And this is what everyone forgets about that. And so Peter, if he's going to jump in, he's got to make that decision sooner rather than later. I've heard, and Peter has said it, and this is the one thing I know about Peter. He is very open and honest when he's talking to groups, talking to the press, but he's got to, at some point, get off that fence and make a decision, whether it's running that. But one key thing that I do see as a possibility was what he was thinking about originally. Could he run as a team to help influence, because we all know he does not like Governor McKee. Could he slide into that lieutenant governor's race? And when you're sitting on over 100,000, it's a shorter runway to raise money for that than to a governor's race.
I think there might be a little niche available where Helena Foulkes is your gubernatorial candidate, Nerona is your lieutenant governor candidate, and then Keith Hoffman, relatively unknown, but comes out of the Nerona administration, is your AG candidate. What you can see is if you start to look at who follows who on Instagram and who travels in similar circles, who's buddies with who behind the scenes, you see this thing lining up that looks like a slate of potential, hey, we're the kind of outsiders coming in and not necessarily formally running together, but there might be a wave of that energy that's combining.
The only caveat and tough part about that type of a ticket aligning, because remember, Peter was talking with Helena, I think, was supportive
about a ticket.
Yep. But then all of a sudden, the whole CVS, debacle comes out.
And then it becomes a legal matter.
It becomes a legal
he's
matter.
Law enforcement.
Correct.
And
he's, been part of, that. And, knowing Peter, walks the walk. He wants to be part of that straight ticket, clean. And that's who he is, too. So I'm not sure if that dynamic fits anymore. So maybe you see if Joe Sacacci runs, maybe there's discussions there. So there's a lot of, moving chess pieces right now.
Yeah, I think the last thing that we should note and to keep an eye on campaign finance reports and see how that holds up for the governor. We'll, those will be out. We'll take a look at that. Allan and Bill, thanks for coming in. It's great to see both of you guys again.
Thanks for having us.
And thank you for joining us for this edition of Lively right here on Ocean State Media. Subscribe to us on YouTube and tell us what you think in the comments section below the video.